Some of the most majestic creatures on this planet are being killed along our coast at rates not seen in more than a decade. We've learned potentially hundreds of endangered whales have died off California's shores over the past few years.
Now, the federal government is about to restart an effort to try and save these whales. Senior investigative reporter Bigad Shaban has been digging into what the plan is and explains why so many of these endangered animals are still expected to wind up dead in the bay.
This is the largest animal ever known to exist on Earth. It's a blue whale, and there's something killing them off the California coast.
There are a number of steps we could be making that we're not making right now.
Biologist John Kalambokidis is leading the effort to protect them.
Got a whale just ahead of me, John, to my left.
He and his team are using suction cups to attach cameras onto whales. They approach in tiny boats, and the work can be dangerous, especially when other whales surface unexpectedly. The aim is to track whale movements and save them from a deadly threat in the bay, one that's even more massive and powerful than they are. Ships, loaded with everything from food and drinks to spices and furniture. Vessels off the California coast are hitting and killing whales at a rate not seen in more than a decade. These ship strikes, as they're called, are blamed for at least 88 whale deaths in California since 2006. 239 whales were killed in all U.S. waters, and about 1 in 3 of those whales was endangered. But those deaths only cover what was reported. The federal government requires shipping companies to document each time they hit a whale, but recognizing a ship strike can sometimes be murky.
The majority of whales that die, in fact, sink and disappear and are never documented. And these ships that strike them are so large, the people on board the ship would be unaware they had even struck it.
So the actual number of dead whales could be higher?
Easily, the number of true deaths is underestimated to a point where you'd want to multiply by 10 or 20 to get closer to what is probably the true number.
20?
Yes.
To protect whales, the federal government started a voluntary speed limit just outside the bay back in 2015. When vessels enter any of the area's 3 shipping lanes, they're asked to slow down to 10 knots per hour from May to November. That's peak whale season in the bay. But scientists are pushing the federal government to triple the size of the slowdown area to save even more whales.
If they add those areas outside of the lanes, they will be covering 99% of the area where vessel traffic overlaps with whale habitat.
Dr. Jaime Yanke is a biologist with Point Blue Conservation.
Visual survey, get ready.
We joined his team as well as scientists from NOAA on a very rocky expedition off the Marin coast.
You have that whale?
To survey whale populations.
Right there, you guys.
This pod of humpbacks couldn't help but make a splash on our cameras. Danny Lipsky is a researcher with NOAA.
This project, through years of data looking at where the whales are and the conditions that they thrive in, has been able to identify those whale hotspots.
That helped scientists create the voluntary slowdown of 10 knots. But we've learned most vessels aren't following it. Coast Guard monitoring found ships broke the speed limit 54% of the time. And that lack of compliance has largely stayed the same for 3 years. Of the 74 shipping companies that sent vessels into the bay in 2018, only 23% followed the requested speed limit.
Nobody on the ship wants to hit a whale.
John Berg is with the Pacific Merchant Shipping Association, which represents companies that send vessels in and out of the bay.
If the shipping company says it cares about protecting whales, why doesn't its track record seem to reflect that?
Well, I think it has to do with the fact that, number one, it's a voluntary speed reduction. Number two, that they're essentially asking them to accommodate that speed reduction within the confines of their scheduling and safety needs.
Plus, he says shipping companies, especially those based abroad, may not have heard about the voluntary slowdown.
How is it that 4 years after this policy went into effect, there are shipping companies that claim they have no idea about these speed restrictions?
There are shipping companies that probably haven't been into the port here in 4 years. And so how do you reach those vessels? It's difficult.
Something isn't working.
Maria Brown is a superintendent with NOAA and admits that nearly half a decade after her office started the slowdown program, they've failed to find a way to notify every incoming ship about it.
We may be reaching the wrong person within the company. So we'll be working with the shipping industry to find out who are the right people within these different companies, because they're all different.
We first spoke to Maria Brown back in 2016 when she warned that the voluntary slowdown could become mandatory with hefty fines if ships continue to speed through the bay.
There's a potential we would have to make it a requirement.
Remember, that was 4 years ago.
Today, ships aren't slowing down most of the time. Was that an empty threat?
I wouldn't call it a threat. The sanctuaries can take regulatory action if we're finding that voluntary cooperation doesn't work.
But that won't be easy. Under the Trump administration, NOAA is focused on cutting regulations, not adding new ones. The White House didn't reply to our request for comment.
It's not our decision. It's the administration's decision.
So could that still be years away?
It would be years away before a regulation would ever be in place.
But certain whale populations may not have years to wait. Take the blue whale. According to government estimates, just 3 deaths a year in our region could push the already endangered whale towards extinction.
I don't think voluntary measures are going to create enough of a solution.
John Kalambokidis is calling for a mandatory speed limit, one that comes with real consequences for shipping companies that fail to slow down.
So the federal government continuing to essentially say pretty please to the shipping industry, you don't think is going to get us where we need to be?
Shipping companies are in competition with each other. The beauty of something like mandatory is that it creates a level playing field and makes all companies comply by the same rules.
The federal government is expected to restart that voluntary slowdown for its 6th year this May. Now, to find out exactly what types of whales have been killed off our coast over the past decade and how many, just log onto our website. That's NBCBayArea.com/investigations. Raj and Jess?
Thank you, Bigad. If you have a story for Bigad or anyone in the investigative unit, call 888-996-TIPS or visit our website, NBCBayArea.com/investigations.